A special event is occurring at the Melbourne Cinematheque on Wednesday, the 24th of May at 7 o'clock at ACMI, and that's a celebration of filmmaker Bill Mousoulis, quite an incredible, prolific filmmaker who I like talking to from time about unknown pleasures. But now we're going to talk about Bill, and it's my great pleasure to be talking to Bill Mousoulis. Welcome to Movie Metropolis again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Peter Krause. You're a legend. Yeah.
A legend, yes. Okay. All right. Now, Bill, it's incredible the over 40 years how many films you have made, short films, feature films, etc. What is it that drives you as being a filmmaker?
Wow, that's probably like a psychological question, which I don't really know the answer to. But I think, like with all art, most artists have a compulsion. It's like a compulsive thing, and whether it's to express oneself or whether it's to express ideas that one has, or observations, or just the reality of oneself, the external reality of oneself, together with internal ideas. I'm not sure what exactly causes it, but I have had a drive to do that, and also a bit of a drive to be involved in the film cultural side of things. But of course, that's another story that you know about, putting screenings on. I've been a critic and all kinds of other things like that as well. Yeah.
Okay. Now, a selection of your films will be screened on the 24th of May, but tell me about your process in deciding what you film and the approaches that you take.
With each particular film, with
Yes.
each individual film, you mean?
Yes.
Well, firstly, I guess one has the idea, and the idea is, or the overall, feeling or concept of the film. And I know Buñuel and his writer Carrière, like to start off with a particular word and then kind of build things from that. I start with a particular feeling. Sometimes I get a particular image, and then I construct a story around that. And quite a lot of the time, I don't know what my next film's going to be. There's no grand plan. I've kind of shifted a bit from a certain kind of narrative to documentary, and now I'm kind of back to like narrative, although a kind of narrative that I've never done before. And then, basically when, there's all kinds. I mean, your question is so broad. I mean, there's casting, there's, selecting a DOP, a selection of a look, all kinds of things involved. And it's a lot of fun, as it happens. And then as you work with the actors and you start doing, firstly with casting, it's you've got to give yourself a couple of tests with them, make sure that they're okay. But once you've glimpsed something in them, then you begin to work with them, rehearse with them, to make the actual film. And when you see the results, when they embody the ideas that you've got, it's such a thrill. And then, of course, when you see the end results, it's quite amazing too. I remember in the past, because I was shooting on film, you don't get to see the final results until you get the film back from the lab, or you go into the lab and see it there. And now with digital, you can shoot something in the day and watch it later on, and that kind of anticipation and trepidation and fear is kind of gone. Oh, and there's been horror stories. Like, I know one filmmaker, a friend of mine, working on Super 8 in the early 90s, he shot a whole bunch of, basically the whole film, probably maybe 2-3 hours of Super 8 on a number of rolls. And as it was going, everything seemed to be working correctly, and everything came back with no sound on the film at all. Even though the sound, he was monitoring it in the Super 8 camera with headphones, and it was there. And it was registering, but it didn't get recorded on the film. And so to then try and double the actors' voices in would have been too hard. But anyway, it's exciting making films. It really is. Yeah.
I can imagine it would be, and the joy of independent filmmaking as well, because I gather
Yeah.
you usually don't have much funding or production support behind you.
Yeah, at the moment, or the last 15 years, I haven't had much support. In my early days, with some of the short films on 16 mil, and one of the features had a bit of funding. Most times, even with those kind of grants, I've been left pretty free to do what I like. It's just that there was the one half hour, funded short back in the late 80s where the Australian Film Commission called me in, and they were suggesting things like, oh, you got to maybe, cut it back to a certain length, and I think they had some qualms about a couple of the actors that I'd chosen, like before that point. But anyway, I stood my ground, and they were okay because they were really good people. The Australian Film Commission, back in the 80s and 90s, it was basically filmmakers in those roles selecting, the films that get funding. And these days, I've got no idea what Screen Australia has or the other funding bodies. I never go to them because I guess they're looking for younger filmmakers anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Now, well, let's talk about some of the films that will be screening on the 24th of May, and I've had a look at them all. It's so a few I'd already seen. It's so interesting to see your short film from 1983, which I gather was one of your first films, Dreams
Yes.
Never End, about the search, I suppose, for this 16-year-old girl for her future, and an event that influences her to some extent. It's such an interesting idea.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always been attracted to female main characters, and I've done them a number of times in my work. And this is at the really early stage of my career, and I was very much influenced by Bresson's Mouchette, about that 16-year-old girl and what she goes through. And so I wanted to do a sad kind of story. And yeah, and this is at the point where I did not know any other filmmakers. I did not know any film actors. So I'm using my sister and a couple of the neighbors, my mother. They're the ones in the film, and yeah, it turned out really well. And it was kind of like my first kind of proper short film after a few kind of tests, a few minor things, just shooting a few streets outside my parents' house and that kind of thing. And yeah, it really kind of took off, that particular film, Dreams Never End, in 83. It got noticed by like the Sydney Super 8 Film Festival, and Adrian Martin really loved it. He called it a classic, and like a heart-rending kind of little work. So I was on my way after that. It was just like a bit of encouragement that I got from other fellow filmmakers and a couple of critics, and also other people, wanting to program my work. And slowly after that, I kind of met some actors and all that. But I didn't go to film school, so I didn't get into Swinburne a couple of times, and probably for the best too, ultimately. But anyway.
Interesting comment. Yes. Okay. Now, Melbourne 89 is quite a revelation and that shows the way you use music so significantly, but also a credit to Ingmar Bergman and Ingrid Bergman, I should say, and Roberto
Yes.
Rossellini, who sort of
Yes.
appear in the film.
Yeah, they do. I mean, it's like an essay film. It's like a
Yeah.
Godardian film. I was influenced by Godard quite a bit in those early days as well, and yeah, just that kind of montage of different things. Other Super 8 filmmakers at the time were doing something similar too. You're shooting on Super 8, and you've got that freedom to basically throw different things together, and see what ensues. After that, there's a nice little section at the end of Melbourne 89 as well, where I line up a number of different people and take like portrait shots, like 5 or 7 second shots of each one. And there's some Super 8 filmmakers in there, like Chris Windmill Heinz Boeck and a few other people, Sarah Johnson. So, yeah, good fun to make. I experimented a bit with my Super 8 short films. So when I went on to features, I did more kind of conventional narratives in a way. Mm.
Okay. Now, culture shock level 1 is an interesting observation about the changing nature of Melbourne over time.
Yes, yes, and that one, yeah, it's that one's made a bit later, 2010, and it's kind of like it details a woman's reverse culture shock in coming back to Australia after being in Europe for like 20 odd years, and I was feeling a similar kind of thing myself after only 1 year in Greece, coming back and seeing a Melbourne and Australia in a different light. But uh, yeah, and that particular woman I've got in the film, that actress Jennifer Levy, that was her kind of life story as well. As an Australian who was born in Australia, she left in like the mid-70s and returned in the mid to late 90s, and then I made a few films with her as an actress. So yeah, that was that film. Mm.
Okay. Now, I found your feature Lovesick so intriguing, partly because it was more explicit than I expected it to be, but also, which is fine, but also the rather elusive storyline about this couple who, may have issues. I found that interesting.
Yes, yes. Oh yeah, yeah. I guess one doesn't know how to look at the couple, and that's something that Jake Wilson brought out in his essay that he wrote a week ago for Senses of Cinema. And I've always been attracted to certain kind of stories about mass murderers and serial killers. I know, which sounds quite bizarre because a lot of the other films I make are like kind of love stories and stories, portraits of ordinary people and that kind of thing. And in this film, I decided to combine the love story with the idea that they're killers as well. Although that's a big spoiler for anyone who hasn't seen the
Yes.
film.
Okay.
And yeah, it is interesting as we look at the couple and as they go about their lives and the choices they make and the reactions they have, we kind of think, what's in their heads? What are they thinking? What is going on here? And so I leave it quite open, and again, it's a very Bressonian kind of narrative. The two of them are used like models, as Bresson dictates in his theories. But yeah, it was an interesting film to make. It was good. Yeah.
I can imagine. The actors, I gather, had
Yeah.
no qualms in the nudity.
No, the actress Holly did have a little bit of trouble with that, but yeah, she was okay in the end. It was difficult, because I wanted some authenticity to having naked bodies on show. So we tried all kinds of like little things, like putting sticky taped patches on their private parts and all this kind of thing, but it didn't work. So in the end, we just kind of went for it. And I think it was only me and the DOP in the bedroom at the time, not the other crew members. And yeah, we did it. Yeah.
Okay. If you were shooting that film today, you'd need an intimacy coordinator, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, I shoot low budget guerrilla type of films. So, but yeah, one has to be, these days, one has to be fully careful of that and make sure that the actors are psychologically ready to shoot, scenes like that. So,
Yes.
yeah.
And what Lovesick also demonstrated, as a number of your other films, is how you show off Melbourne in particular ways.
Yes. Yes, I've always loved Melbourne. It's where I was born. It's where most of my films, in fact, all of my films from the first 25 years of filmmaking before I went to Greece, where all of my films were shot. And and Melbourne, I mean, us Melburnians, you know, we do have a particular relationship to our city, and it is a very artistic city, as everyone knows. And something about the filmmakers in Melbourne, the independent filmmakers, gives it a special quality. Someone like Dirk de Bruin understands that, and he talks about that a lot, a certain kind of Melbourne quality that a lot of the films have. And yeah, half the time it is actually just, you know, setting the film in Melbourne and using, you know, the streets as we see them, not shying away from that. And a bit similar to the film Queensland by John Ruane that Unknown Pleasures played a couple of months ago, where we see that kind of you know, documentation, as it were, of the city. And yes, there's been lots of trams in my films, and different kinds of trams, from the old W class to those orange ones, and then to the more modern ones. Yeah.
I've noticed those. Yes, they're very interesting. Now,
yeah.
Songs of the Underground and Songs of the Revolution, I know I've seen Underground, but the two films are pretty much strongly related, because they deal with Greek music, but also Greek protests and obviously economic crises and so on that befell Greece. So I'm quite interested in the way you put those films together.
Well, what happened is that, I kind of made the decision to live in Greece back in 2009, and I made one feature first, which was had some of the themes of the crisis, the social crisis and economic crisis in there. But then after a couple more years of living there, I got really into the music and also just all the protests that were going on against the government and against fascism in particular. One could see fascistic kind of elements at play quite a lot, and I really felt for the people, and I wanted to contribute something around this kind of theme, an anti-fascist film. So for me, it was a real kind of dive into the politics of Greece at the time, and especially the protesters, like the anti-authoritarian anarchist type people that were around, and the music was sensational. I mean, I delved into like the history of Greek music, you know, especially protest music, and a lot of it sort of begins with the rembetika, like the Greek blues, but then there's like a whole bunch of protest singers in the 60s, 70s, in Athens, in Greece, and then more recently, you know, punk and hip hop music. And the lyrics are fantastic, you know, like most of the hip hop bands are actually quite political. And I was so inspired by this music, I wanted to capture it. So I got to know a number of the artists. And two films were created. Songs of Revolution has documentary and fictional things in it. And Songs of the Underground, which is the one that the Cinematheque will be playing on the 24th, that one is like documentary only. So that's a kind of purer documentary only type version of the film. And it was great fun. It was great fun. But now I'm back in Australia, living in Adelaide. So another period has begun in the last few years here. Yeah.
And you're consistently making films, I gather.
I am. I haven't. I mean, the past 4 or 5 years, I've spent a lot of time just putting screenings on, like in Melbourne, the Unknown Pleasures and a few other things. And I actually haven't made any short films in the last 5 years, which usually I'll do, you know, maybe 1 or 2 each year, just keep my hand in. But yes, I have made another subsequent feature, you know, shot in Adelaide. That was just last year. So that's now ready to go if the film festivals want to screen it. And this one is sort of like I was saying at the start of the interview, it's a little bit different. Again, it's back to narrative, but it's basically a musical. And it's a musical inspired by Jacques Demy's Umbrellas of Cherbourg. And so it's all singing, you know, it's like back to back all the way, music and singing. And it's good fun. And I'll be screening it here and there. whoever wants it.
Hey, it's a film I'm really looking forward to seeing. I'd love to have a look at it. So,
Cool, cool, yeah,
and hopefully, if we get some screenings in Melbourne, we can then talk about that film in more detail.
sure,
That'd be great.
sure,
So
yeah.
let's now talk about Wednesday, the 24th of May at the Melbourne Cinematheque at ACMI. Tell me about what's going to happen on the evening.
Well, there's basically two sessions, one at 7 o'clock, one at 9 o'clock, and each session has, one of the features and two shorts. Someone from the Cinematheque, I imagine Adrian Danks, will introduce things. I'll then do my own introduction to each session. But the way the Cinematheque works, there's no Q&A or anything like that at the end, because, I guess the second session finishes probably 10:30, but probably 10:45 by the time everything winds up. So I guess they don't have Q&As, and that's fine. And it'll be great for me because the Cinematheque was where I started pretty much as a film lover back 40 years ago. That's where I saw the Bresson films and the Godard films and all that. So it's quite fitting for me, quite appropriate that I'm kind of back there now after 40 years of making films myself and presenting a program. So I'm really pleased about the screening that it's happening. So, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. People should go to the Melbourne Cinematheque website for more details and go along and see Bill's films on the 24th of May. That sounds terrific. And as you say, you'll be there to introduce the films, which is so important. Excellent stuff. Bill, it's great to talk to you as always, and I'll just leave you with a final question. Apart from your own films, have you seen anything else of late that impressed you?
I did see one film, and it did really, really impress me. And a documentary on Beiruz Buchani, called simply Beiruz, and it's had a few like special screenings around this year at ACMI and a few other places. It hasn't played in film festivals, and I'm not sure why. Probably because it's so anti-government, and I think that kind of stops it, because it really kind of details that whole detention process for refugees on Manus Island and all that kind of thing. And anyway, this documentary itself has got some of the best footage I've ever seen, documentary footage, basically taken by the prisoners in Manus prison as they're being held and as they go on strike and try and fight for their rights. It's some extraordinary documentary footage that exists, and so that one really knocked me out, and hopefully it gets a few more screenings here and there.
Oh, I'll definitely look out for it. And of course, everyone should be looking out for Bill Mousoulis's films, screening on Wednesday, 24th of May at the Melbourne Cinematheque at ACMI. And as always, Bill, it's a pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
Pleasure talking to you too, Peter. And I hope to see a few people there on that Wednesday night. So I look forward to it. Yeah.
Should be a good evening, and especially to catch up with your films. Thanks again for talking with me.
Yep. Thanks, Peter. See you then.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.